Hi everybody and welcome to CFL Trade Tree episode number 7. My name is Robert Dalton and in today's episode we're going to be talking about how the Hamilton Ticats became a dominating team in the Eastern Division for the last couple of years.
Second and 13. Pass caught by Addison, who's ducked under a tackle and will run it in. Touch pressure coming. And it gets to Franklin.
My age, and you grew up in Canada, and of course most of you are watching this from Canada, you grew up probably watching hockey in the 80s. Great. And so when you're watching hockey, and you assume that every team or every sports league, when you watch them go to the finals of any kind of league, you just assume that that was the norm. Because Edmonton did it every year, the Islanders did it everywhere, and for some reason Boston did it a couple times in the 80s and even once in the 90s. In the CFL, that's where I thought it was going. Edmonton and Toronto in 87. All of a sudden, boom, 1988, BC and Winnipeg. Saskatchewan and Hamilton in 89. And of course, the 90s started with the Bombers and the Edmonton Eskimos. Yeah, I'm thinking maybe the Bombers are onto something. That was the last time they actually won the Grey Cup until this year. You know it is. Where am I getting at with that? Well, for as long as I remember being a CFL football fan, I don't remember that the Hamilton Ticats had a dominating team. They might have had a good year, but it didn't last very long. It wasn't a destiny. I mean, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers had the 80s and early 90s. Calgary had for whatever long that they had with John Hufnagel. The Edmonton Football Club had pretty much the entire 80s. Hamilton they had great players, Hall of Fame players. They just never had that consistency that lasted longer than a year. You know, they from 89 when they lost to the Saskatchewan Roughriders, it took them 9 years before they got to the big game again. Well, and then they pulled the trick back to back, and then the 2000s happened. How bad was it? Well, it took them 14 years before they got to the big game again, and well, they pulled the back-to-back trick again, and then it took them another 5 years before they got to the big game again, and then this happened. Sorry to rub it in, Tiger Cat fans, I'm with you on this video. So how did the Hamilton Ticats become a dominating force in the CFL? Well, let's take a trip to the Wayback Machine, back to the year 2009, September to be exact, where there was a big blockbuster trade, not involving the Hamilton Ticats. It was the Calgary Stampeders and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. The initial trade saw the Calgary Stampeders acquire receivers R.J. Franklin, Romby Bryant, future considerations, and a third-round pick in 2010. Alright, so let's take that future consideration because that's easy. That was a conditional pick based on the trade that was completed after the 2009 season. Those conditions were met, so the Bombers didn't really have to give up anything, so that's a wash. The 2010 third-round pick, that was used to select John Bender, offensive lineman. And if you don't remember John Bender, you're excused because he didn't play at all in 2010. He had NFL aspirations, came back and put pen to paper in 2011, and that was his only year. That ends that one. Romby Bryant, that was a very interesting trade. Romby Bryant came off his rookie year in the CFL with, I don't even remember how many catches he had, but it was over 1,200 yards, personal best, 8 touchdowns. Great. 2009, he had some issues with the coaching staff in Winnipeg and traded halfway through the season. Getting to know the Calgary playbook, didn't really have the best stats. 2010, watch out, because Romby Bryant set personal records, 75 catches, 1,100 yards, 15 touchdowns. Helped the Calgary Stampeders get to the Grey Cup the year after that. Actually, it was 2 years after that. My math is not wrong. After the 2012 Grey Cup, Romby Bryant was quietly released. He signed on with the Toronto Argonauts. Actually had another go-ahead with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in 2014 before signing a one-game contract and retiring as a Calgary Stampeder after that year. And that ends that one. R.J. Franklin, his best year was actually the year before he got traded. And unfortunately with R.J. Franklin, because Winnipeg had actually selected him first in their pick in 2006, it was actually the third round, but it was Winnipeg's first selection. They had high hopes and they were hoping that it would work out for them. It kind of did, but not as much as that they would like. When he was traded, never really got into the opportunities because of injuries and being so low on the depth chart. And after the 2012 season, he retired to become a Windsor police officer, and he's still doing it as we speak. Full disclosure, R.J. Franklin in 2006 walked out of the Bomber locker room, and I'm playing football with my cousin, and he says, "Dalts, throw him a pass," and I did, and he caught it, therefore solidifying myself as a league leader in CFL training camp for completion percentage. 1 for 1, 100%. Why is it a big deal? Because there are fans and media alike blowing smoke up the ass of quarterbacks who put up big preseason numbers but have yet to do anything in the regular season. So yeah, it counts. Let's take a look and see what the Winnipeg Blue Bombers did on this side of the trade tree. The Bombers acquired receivers Titus Ryan, Jabari Arthur, Odell Willis, a 4th round pick in 2010, a 6th round pick in 2010, and future considerations. I told you about the future considerations and Calgary side. It didn't really amount to anything because it was a conditional pick. The Bombers actually acquired offensive lineman Derek Armstrong. And don't get confused with the receiver Derek Armstrong, because neither one of those players actually played in game in 2010. Armstrong had some issues with Mike Kelly, and I'm talking about the receiver. Sat out most of the entire 2009, so I get the kind of confusion there. Regardless, I'm rambling for the sake of rambling. Derek Armstrong, neither one of them played for the Bombers in 2010, so that's why Calgary didn't get that conditional pick. Titus Ryan actually coming to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, 275 yards passer catching, 3 touchdowns, and added an additional 150 in the kickoff returns. It was so great that we were looking forward to seeing what Titus Ryan could do in 2010, but that never happened because he was so good. He got on the radar with the NFL, signed with the Dallas Cowboys, and never returned. Jabari Arthur at 6'4", 240 pounds. That's a big target that Winnipeg was hoping. They were hoping to make Jabari Arthur the next big thing, the next big Canadian slot back that the Bombers had never had since the 90s by the name of Gerald Wilcox. And it just never amounted to anything. He had some injuries, never returned in 2010. Actually got released prior to the 2010 season and signed back with Calgary to not do that much anyway. If you're actually taking score right now, Calgary actually had some nice production in the regular season and postseason, but they didn't get a Grey Cup during their trade tree with those particular players. We still have a couple of trade assets that Winnipeg's going through, so it may actually look pretty good. Titus Ryan was a good selection. He was just too good. The future consideration never worked out. Let's take a look and see what the Bombers did with their draft picks. The 2010 6th round draft pick actually was used to select offensive lineman Chris Greaves. Now, I'll forgive you for not remembering episode 3 when we talked about the Kerry Joseph thing, trading, blah, 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 blah. Long story short, he was actually part of that trade tree, and the part of Chris Greaves was traded to the Edmonton Football Club in exchange for the rights to Selvish Capers and a 9th overall pick in 2016. That was actually used to select Trent Corney, who quietly retired after the 2017 season with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So that trade tree is done. The 4th round pick in 2010 that was very interesting. That was used to select Anthony Woodson. Now, the Bombers and quite frankly a lot of other teams weren't in the revolution of non-import or national running back situation there. So the Bombers had actually had a very good running game with Fred Reed. Eventually they would get to Chris Garrett, eventually Chad Simpson. So they didn't have a lot of room for a guy like Anthony Woodson's skill set. In the middle of 2013, Anthony Woodson was traded to the Toronto Argonauts along with a 5th round pick in 2014 in exchange for Mark Parenteau and a 3rd round pick in 2014. Anthony Woodson left through free agency. The 5th round pick was used to select defensive back Eric Black, who didn't play. That's done. Mark Parenteau waved bye-bye to the Bombers after the 2013 season. I think he stuck around with the Saskatchewan Roughriders, but it doesn't really matter. He left through free agency. That's on with that. The 3rd round pick in 2014, this is probably one of the most underrated trades in Kyle Walter's early career with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers when he took over back in the middle of 2013. He took that 3rd round pick in 2014 and sent it to the Calgary Stampeders in exchange for defensive back Chris Randall. Now, Chris Randall had a very bad 2018 season, but over his 5-year career with Winnipeg, over 300 tackles, 12 interceptions, and 2 touchdowns, and is part of the reason why Winnipeg actually turned it around in 2016 and become the so-called juggernaut that they are today. The Calgary Stampeders, well, they took that draft pick and selected Adam Tebow, who quietly walked away from the game after a couple of seasons. That ends this one. Okay, so let's get to the meat and potatoes of this trade tree. Odell Willis. Odell Willis was a colorful character, and you knew that he was going to become big. You just didn't know how big he was going to be. In 2010, he was 2nd on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in sacks, getting to the quarterback. Why is that a big deal? Because, your 4 defensive end spot, the 4 lineman spots on the team, not a big deal. Well, it is when you consider that he was 3rd in the entire league. That's right. For some reason, Winnipeg had 2 of the top 3 sack getters and finished 4-14. Rewarded with a new 2-year contract, Philip Hunt actually left to go to the NFL, and Odell Willis was on fire in 2011, getting to the quarterback 13 times and leading the Bombers to the Grey Cup in 2011 before being bested by the powerful BC Lions. Okay, so Winnipeg actually did pretty good with this original trade, and now it gets downhill. Joe Mack, after the 2011 season, in his infinite wisdom, says we're going to get cheaper and younger, trades Odell Willis and a 5th round pick in 2012 to the Saskatchewan Roughriders in exchange for the 8th overall, 23rd overall in 2012, and a conditional pick in 2013. Okay, that conditional pick was actually contingent on Odell Willis re-signing with the Saskatchewan Roughriders. We know the story. Odell Willis set records by signing a contract going into free agent frenzy with the Edmonton Football Club, so Saskatchewan didn't have to give up anything with that conditional pick. The 5th round pick that Saskatchewan got selected offensive lineman Matt Vaughn. Very good, reliable player. However, the majority of the time that he did play with the Riders was in 2015 and 2016. Those teams were god awful. Even with Chris Jones at the helm, they were awful. After the 2016 season, Vaughn was traded to the Montreal Alouettes in exchange for defensive back Denzel Radford. Ironically, Montreal had actually just drafted Radford, and that might speak volumes to how Montreal was operating around this time, okay? Radford actually just left the Saskatchewan Roughriders to sign with the Toronto Argonauts because everybody signed with the Toronto Argonauts. Vaughn bounced around on PR with the Owls before being quietly released. That ends with that one. 23rd overall pick was actually used to select linebacker Rennie Steffen, and I think the Bombers had hoped they really loved how this guy operated in college. He just never bulked up as that they wanted him to, and quietly after the 2013 season, he was actually released and walked away from football, never played again. The 8th overall pick is huge in this trade tree because the Winnipeg Blue Bombers packaged that 8th overall pick and the 13th overall pick in 2012 and sent it to the Hamilton Ticats in exchange for the 3rd overall pick. Remember I said it was going downhill? The Winnipeg Blue Bombers used that 3rd overall pick to select offensive lineman Tyson Pencer. This is a guy that was projected to still be there at 8th and much probably still early 2nd round. So the Bombers really wanted him. I'm not too sure it was worthy of them actually trading up that much. Pencer didn't play that much, if at all, and was released after the 2013 season. The Hamilton Ticats, but 13th overall, used that to select offensive lineman Carson Rockhill. Big dude, filled with a lot of hype. Hamilton was hoping to have Carson on their team for years to come. It just never materialized, dressing on the PR every now and then, just never happened. At 8th overall, the Hamilton Ticats selected defensive back Courtney Stephen. And you're thinking, okay, this doesn't count because Courtney Stephen signed as a free agent with Calgary, only to re-sign with Hamilton this past offseason, so you're not going to count that as why Hamilton's dominating. No, but it doesn't help. Courtney Stephen is a reliable defensive back, and he's a national player to boot. And how good is he? Not looking at his numbers? Well, consider this, that the Calgary Stampeders have been known to actually not sign anybody through free agency unless it was like a week or two after free agency has hit, and it's for a bargain basement type contract on the cheap side. They signed Courtney Stephen on day 2 of free agency going into the 2019 season. That's how much they speak. That's how much they see as far as his potential goes. Again, that only lasted for 1 year. He signed back with Hamilton, and I can't wait to see what he does when the CFL eventually returns. All right, so Carson Rockhill. Yeah, he didn't play for the Hamilton Ticats, but he has some assets here. He was packaged with linebacker Nathan Cundy to the Edmonton Football Club in exchange for offensive lineman Greg Voigt, linebacker Simone Lawrence, and quarterback Jeremiah Mazzoli. This trade speaks volumes to how bad Edmonton might have been management-wise at this time and how good Hamilton was at this time. They weren't dominating now. Greg Voigt played with the Ticats in 13 and 14, helping them get to the Grey Cup in both those years before actually returning to Edmonton. That ends that one. Simone Lawrence, look, we can actually talk for long periods of time about his on-field activities and how his hits are kind of on the edge here and there, but the guy has skills. The guy has played in the CFL for 8 years, and it looks like he has enough gas in the tank to play for a couple more had it not been for COVID. Up recently, he just broke the record for most tackles in a game, a record that stood from way back in 2003. Ironically enough, both times the record was broken against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in Winnipeg. Go figure. Jeremiah Masoli, hey, he's considered a late bloomer, not taking over the helmet until 2016 due to injury concerns and the fact that Hamilton wasn't playing that well. Holds a record for most completions, consecutive completions in a game that was held by Jason Moss, who broke that record against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers back in 2004. I'm not trying to make this about the Bombers. All right, pretend that I even said that. It's all about Winnipeg. All right. So Jeremiah Masoli, had it not been for an injury, was actually putting up very good MOP type numbers. Still has the penchant of throwing the ball away on the odd time, but let's be honest, if Jeremiah Masoli never had that injury in week 7 of last year, we're probably talking about the Hamilton Ticats winning the Grey Cup and not Winnipeg. As much as I like to not play the what-if game, it's a very interesting conversation. As much as dominating as Winnipeg's defense was, Jeremiah Masoli does have the experience. And for this alone, I think Hamilton comes out really smelling like roses and has the potential of taking his dominating team for a couple more years when the CFL eventually returns. When the CFL returns, and if the Winnipeg Blue Bombers don't capture the Grey Cup, there's nothing that would make me more happy than to see the Hamilton Ticats do so. Their fans deserve it, their coaches deserve it, and their players deserve it. It's a common thing that after the Grey Cup, the losing coach puts on the brave face to congratulate the winning coach before turning around, swearing under his breath like he's Fred Flintstone. When Orlando Steinhauer was caught on camera congratulating Mike O'Shea and hugging his former colleague and current friend, you got the consensus was it was pure, genuine happiness. And for Orlando Steinhauer in that type of situation to still put his friends before his personal growth, it actually speaks volumes for him, and he's got my respect. And I can definitely say that if there is a second team that you could cheer for in the CFL, in a 19 league, it's got to be the Hamilton Ticats. That'll do it for this week's video. And next video, I'm going to take a look at a trade deadline trade that benefited both teams. One short term, and of course, the other one long term. I hope I didn't give it away. Stay tuned for that. If you like what you saw, hit the comment below, and if you have any future suggestions for any future trade trees, hit the comment below. And if you really like what you saw and you want to see more content, hit subscribe. If you don't want to hit the comment below, hey, follow me on Twitter. You can find me at Rouge Dalts. My podcast is available at Rouge Radio. And of course, this video is powered by the Canadian Football Podcast Network. Follow them at CF Pod Network on Twitter.